up on YouTube. Oh, there we are. We are up on
Okay.
YouTube now.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for being prompt and together virtually this afternoon. I'm Carol Jackson, and I'm the chair of the Human Resources Council Committee. And I would like to call this meeting to order on December 9 at 3:30 p.m. I'll give the invocation if we can bow our heads for a minute. Our Heavenly Father, we ask and thank you for your presence, your wisdom, and your voice of inspiration to us this afternoon as we gather in your name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, thank you. Let me first ask if we have a resolution to approve the minutes that were written for the meeting on August 19th, 2021.
So moved.
Is there a second? Councilmember Gregory?
Second.
Thank you. Any changes to the minutes? All in favor to accept and adopt the minutes from August 19th, 2021?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Heather. Thank you for being with us. So I'm now going to, before I introduce Amber Johnson, who's the presenter of the only item that we have in front of us this afternoon, I just want to welcome, I see John Mitchell and Darren Calhoun, who are both members of the Special Commission on Equity, Inclusion, Racial Conciliation Subcommittee, which was an internal review of city policy and procedures and staffing and all of that Amber will be putting in front of us today. So thank you, John and Darren, for being with us. I know that, your time is valuable, and we really appreciate the change that you made in order to be with us today. And I'll be happy to call on you after Amber puts the report summary in front of us. So Amber, does anyone else have any comments to make before we call on Amber? I do want to thank Heather Pope, our Associate Director of Human Resources, and especially if you're giving up some vacation hours, Heather, I wasn't sure. I know that you and Kay Cross were both taking long delayed leave this month. So thank you if you've made that sacrifice, and regardless, being representative of your department's leadership this afternoon. Oh, and here's Mayor. I wasn't expecting to see the mayor today. Thank you so much, Mayor Tecklenburg.
Thank you. Good to be with y'all.
Okay, great. All right, then I'm ready to turn it over to Amber. So Amber Johnson, feel free to present to us. Thank you so much. And everybody knows Amber.
Good afternoon. Am I sharing my screen? Can you see it?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So I will be presenting today the recommendations from the Internal Review Committee. The committee members included Darren Calhoun and John Mitchell, both of whom are with us today. Kendra Snipe, who's with the Citadel, Tina Singleton, who's with the Y, and Marla Robinson from the College of Charleston. The goals that we gave this group, we asked them to create an infrastructure and mechanism that holds the city accountable for advancing racial equity in its internal practices, services provided to the community. We asked them to review policy, practices, budgets, hiring procedures, to look at a racial equity framework and criteria, create proactive and engaging racial equity teams, developed for measuring success, and reviewing the slavery apology for implementation. So out of their recommendations, they came up with 3 strategies. The first one being racial equity training for all city employees. let me go back. And under that, those action items included establishing a budget under the manager of equity, inclusion, and racial conciliation, requiring all city employees to attend racial equity training, city employees pass a racial equity assessment prior to onboarding and renew that certification on a biannual basis, work with community partners to develop a racial equity framework to reverse uneven hiring and promotion standards, require all contractors to adopt the city's racial equity framework prior to obtaining city funds. Racial equity core team is formed to provide focus and direction to the items in its plan, and the team may form smaller working groups to carry out specific tasks. Conversational opportunities offer less formal opportunities, such as watching videos or conversations around racial equity in a lunch and learn format. Community conversations work with local partners to host some community conversations around racial equity. Employee racial equity survey, conduct employee and city council racial equity survey. Racial equity as a core competency in job descriptions. Departments identify as appropriate specific job classifications with key racial equity responsibilities and incorporate racial equity as a core competency expectations in those job descriptions. And clear racial equity expectations for managers, training on equitable hiring practices, managing and supervising employees for all staff with hiring and supervisory duties, develop clear expectations and accountability for racially equitable workplaces. And I can say that as far as the racial equity core team, that's been developed. We had our first meeting today. I have 18 staff members from across departments, and our next meeting will be in January. We will receive racial equity training from the South Carolina Human Affairs Commission. I've also started community conversations with our planning departments. We've had several lunch and learns and community conversations. I'm also working on developing that with our community partners. The second strategy is establish a livable wage for all city staff that coincides with the cost of living within city limits. So audit wages of city employees that evaluates race and gender disparities, develop cost analysis study that will determine the annual cost of increased wages aligned with the MIT study on minimum wage, reallocation of the city of Charleston yearly budget to annual increase of lowest 10% of earners over a 5-year term, and develop a Section 8 savings plan for city employees to establish early stages of wealth accumulation with the potential to lead to home ownership within the city. The third and final strategy is to address the hiring practices in city departments to dismantle systemic barriers to hiring and promoting qualified minority candidates. So audit the demographical data of hiring and promotion within the city from the past 5 years, increase diversity recruitment and in-house pipeline for all city supervisors, managers, and human resource position, reestablish city-funded professional development, and require department-level reviews that establish the short-term and long-term goals for city employees. This review should develop a plan of action that will establish what professional development is needed for the employee to achieve said goals. And those were the 3 strategies that came from the recommendations in the report. We'll stop sharing.
Just a quick question, Amber, for not just you, but the entire team. I think that most people are familiar with diversity training. Can you sort of distinguish, if we can, the difference between the two? It's not a loaded question. It's just a burning question that I think we need to sort of talk about a bit, because I'm sure that there are some aspects of diversity training. From my reading this, is already incorporated in it. So this is probably more of a question to Heather and maybe Wesley, because you guys do have some diversity aspect of our function. Can you kind of sort of, based upon your review of these recommendations, say how they may differ, if at all?
Wes, I think you're on mute.
To your question, we've had initial discussions with Dale Carnegie regarding the diversity, inclusion, and equity training to be promoted throughout the city workforce. But what we wanted to do is have conversations with Ms. Johnson and the team in terms of what kind of strategy that we want to put together in terms of pushing it out. You know, what's the focus? Are we looking at, you know, some of the inequities, maybe in promotional opportunities? Are we looking for inequities in terms of resource allocation, service delivery? So we've got initial conversations about the training, but we need to find out what kind of focus those trainings we need to have for the city.
Is Dudley again, based upon the strategy recommendations from the subcommittee, can those be incorporated into your diversity training in conjunction with Amber and the subgroup?
Right, that's my point. Before we try to roll out anything, we want to make sure that what we're promoting out to the city employees meets the needs of the committee and Amber's you know, role in terms of this. So we want to make sure we get all that kind of data analytics first. We'll sit down with Dale Carnegie, come with a plan that incorporates all that in the diversity training.
Will they be
Just to clarify, Mr. Morgan, the Dale Carnegie would be the consulting team that would lead some of this training? Is that?
We've had initial conversations with them in terms of that already. But again, we have just initial conversations. But before we come out with a platform about what we want, we need to sit down and talk about what type of strategies the city wants so we can make sure that what we're promoting out to the employees is exactly what we need.
Okay,
And that would
great.
also be
Okay.
dependent on funding for that training too. Yeah, we're happy. Wes has done some research on the training they have available, and they've been a good partner to us in the past, but it definitely was not in our budget for 2022. So that would be kind of another question too.
And do we have any
That's,
sense?
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Madam
No,
Chair.
go ahead, Mr. Councilmember. I'm going to take a step back and ask our subcommittee members if they would like to make any comments after Amber's report. So finish your thought, please.
I guess the cost would be contingent upon the depth of what we request from them. Am I correct? Do we have any sense of cost?
We don't have a sense of cost, but you're exactly correct. Depending on the depth of what we're looking for, again, going back to the analytics of what we're actually asking them to do, that would dictate the cost of the actual training.
And one last question, how do we select them?
We haven't selected them at all. What we've done is we've had previous experience with them in kind of a leadership development training we had for some departments. So we've already had somewhat of partnership with them. Certainly there's other vendors out there, but we just, since we had previous experience with them in regards to training, we actually reached out to them in this regard. And certainly Dale Carnegie's name and recognition is certainly a high standard in the industry.
So just to get a better idea of how you would frame a training consulting services set of strategies or work plan or contract, right? Is that you're
Again,
using them as sort of the beginning of your investigation on what that all could look like?
Well, again, you know, what we would do is like with any other proposal or contract, we'd have to make a decision, analytics of what we want. And
Right.
then, you know, per the city policy, either publish that out to get a vendor or whatever. But I think in the meantime, what we'd have to do is kind of, find out what the nuts and bolts are about what we want. So whoever is the vendor that does this understands what the action items the city wants in order for this to be a successful project.
So you're
Okay.
talking about scope of work.
Absolutely, sir.
And you'll be working very closely with Amber and the committee to try to put that together before we put anything on the street, if I'm understanding you.
That would be my plan, sir. Yes, I actually was on the initial call with Ms. Johnson today regarding the committee. And I'm assuming that we're going to have a lot more interaction with the committee in terms of the structure. And then, like I said before, once we get that, then we'll be in a position to put out to whatever vendor it might be, what we're looking for, and make sure that the end game is exactly what we want.
Okay, great. Thank you. And if we need to circle back around this particular set of questions, Councilmember Gregory, let's do that. But I would like to call on Darren Calhoun, who is the chair of the Internal Review Subcommittee, and John Mitchell, who is the vice chair, to collect your comments for this committee opportunity.
Excuse me. Good day. I'm Darren Lee Calhoun II. I'm with the Avery Research Center for African American History and Culture. And I would say I'm glad to hear that work is being moved forward with on your end, Brother Morgan, Ms. Pope, working along with Amber on trying to particularly getting that first one pushed through. That racial equity training is pivotal if we want to keep moving forward and keep getting the city pushing the city move forward inside of a more equitable workplace. I know we try to get everything reinforced at the college and whatnot, and other different places throughout the city. But if we want to be the place that, if we want to be the truly equitable place that the city can actually be, that would be one of the first steps. And I guess my only tossing with that would be, if I was to rank the strategies of how we have it, or not even rank, we'll put them inside of a specific order. I would definitely put the equity training first, but then moving to the, from there, I'll move to the hiring and promotion, and then going forward to the livable waging, just so we can move in line. I'm glad that we are here making this move. And John,
Yeah, I'll echo what Darren has shared, and just add that the continued partnership and collaboration with Amber makes me feel comfortable with the route that you guys are going. I've got a lot of faith in what you all are doing and the tenor of what you're trying to do, because I know, very uniquely of the work that is aimed to be done with this group. I know, intimately that you all had done a lot of work around being viewed as a ally community for the LGBTQIA plus community. And Heather, you and I have had conversations about, the work that was done and made when some scoring came out maybe about 5 to 7 years ago that showed how poorly the city would score on those metrics, and just the improvements that have been made since then to where now we're we're one of the most hospitable cities for LGBTQ plus or QIA plus members of those communities. So I think if we can kind of take that same attitude and not see the challenges that we're facing around racial equity and conciliation towards, that we took towards that same measure and see the same kind of results, I'm excited to see where it'll go. We talked about Dale Carnegie. I'm a Dale Carnegie alumna and alum of that program. And I know that, Herb Drayton is running a great process right there out of Vertical Holdings there right off of Faber. So I know that that group is a good group. And just like I said, as long as Amber's in the room to kind of help vet the conversation, I have all the confidence in the world that it'll do amazing things for the direction you guys are aiming to go in. So I just want to give you guys kudos for that, and just say, briefly that this is a safe space, right? Darren and I are here to work with you all to accomplish these goals. We're not here in a anything other than collaborative measure to do more and better for where we call home. So I just kind of wanted to make that clear and level set with this group, that this is not something that we're trying to make you guys feel anxious about. We're here to kind of get you guys comfortable with some things that may originally seem a little bit out of our norm, and that's okay, because we can move together forward as long as we're able to see that there's more work to be done and can acknowledge that. Then it does a lot in terms of restoring the humanity to the people that really have built this city. So I'm excited to see where we can kind of go from here.
Absolutely.
Thank you, John. Before I call on council members to make any comments or ask additional questions, I'd like to give Heather Pope, the Senior Staff Representative for the Human Resources Department, the opportunity to make any comments or ask your own questions, Heather.
Sure. So we took a look at this, and honestly, we kind of are being, the information's been shared with us. I guess when it was shared with the public, there's probably more detail that went into these recommendations that might be helpful in helping us to better understand what's trying to be accomplished and how we can kind of further research that. But one thing I know that I can't remember if it was Darren or John mentioned as far as the minimum wage. We have obviously been working very hard to get that number up and get it up for all employees. We're struggling like all employers, probably the College of Charleston as well, to get employees, and it's a hard time right now. So I appreciate City Council's commitment to that last night and moving towards in January. Fingers crossed that we will be moving towards a $14 minimum wage. One thing that was mentioned in this study was originally it was noted as a Harvard study. I think it's been adjusted to be an MIT study, and we'll take a look at the link now that we've got that. There's a mention there about adjusting the lowest 10% earners. That we do have a concern about, because we have a lot of people who may be 10% apart or less, that may be a supervisor to another employee, and we feel like that could create a leapfrogging effect. But we definitely want to, and we appreciate City Council's work with us and the mayor to get our pay plan adjusted, because we know that we're not competitive right now. We're hoping we will be much more so in January. So just to give you an update on that.
Heather, just for clarity in terms of the leapfrog, I mean, what you're saying is, and just so that we're clear, if we do that with the bottom 10%, it's going to affect all salary levels.
If we do it with the bottom 10%, I believe we're going to create problems with the employees and their supervisors.
Yeah.
So for example, if we take the bottom 10%, and I had Ryan just run some calculations for me, because he's really good at doing that and really good at doing that quickly. We have, let's say, an African-American male construction crew leader who's making $14.81 and is in the 9.8% of earners. You've got an African-American female construction crew leader who's making $14.93, which is 10.4%. So in that case, that male counterpart would then leapfrog her, if that makes sense, if the increases were just applied to the bottom 10%. So that would be concerning to us. We're happy to look at kind of what maybe was the discussion around that and further explore that, but kind of on surface with just what we've been given, that was one that was a cause of concern.
But shouldn't we be looking at the legality of it first?
I think so, and I don't know that, I think that's a good point, Councilmember Gregory. I don't know that any of these recommendations have had a legal review, so I think that's important too.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to call on our council members who are committee members for Human Resources. Any comments or questions from you all?
I had a quick question. So I've gone through the Racial Equity Institute that the YWCA puts on, as well as I'm a Riley Fellow from last year. So they have an exceptional program as well. And so I'm just wondering, would we be creating a program from scratch, or would we be able to, like the Racial Equity Institute's a good example, start with department heads and then just kind of work our way down through that and be able to send them to something that already exists, has a lot of buy-in from the community, run by a good community organization, be able to do something like that instead of the city kind of doing it from scratch.
I'll jump in first here. Councilman Brady, I think you championing that push alongside Councilman Gregory and Saccharin, I think will go a long way in us being able to get what's needed to have that done. There is cost associated with making that occur. And the cost associated with making that occur, especially you mentioned REI, it's an amazing program. But what we were trying to do is kind of meet you guys where you are in terms of what you can legitimately get done and get done in a timely manner. But let's be clear, we recognize that the YWCA's REI program is the cream of the crop for this region in terms of that kind of training, and that is really the standard that we would love to get to. But there is a significant price point to get to that. And I think there is an opportunity for some collaboration. So if you all want to leverage your networks to build, to make that occur, I think that's a great idea. So I just kind of wanted to share that. And I would love to have someone like yourself be a vocal champion for that, along with some of the others that are clearly already, doing the work and making it clear that that's the position that they stand from. So I just kind of wanted to make that.
Thank you very much for raising that very pertinent question, Councilmember Brady. I know I think it was 2018, I diverted part of my council travel budget or convention budget or whatever. We traditionally used the little bit of money that the city budgets for city council education. So I used that to go to REI. And when I was there, the Chief Burgess from the North Charleston Police Department was sending his patrol captains and investigative lieutenants, I think, or sergeants, whatever divisions. And he pledged to the whole room at the end of those 2 days that the whole police department would ultimately go through REI. I think we are, we're definitely on the inside track by having Tina Singleton, who's in charge of REI for the Y, be part of this internal review subcommittee. And certainly she understands the intrinsic value of having this kind of in-depth experience, I think, for all of us. So yeah, I think we should definitely see what we could do to work out a good arrangement with the Y and start, like you said, on an incremental basis. But thanks for putting it out there. It'll be on the minutes in January.
Yeah, no, and I was going to say as well, because the organization that I work for with my day job, every single person who matriculates into Teach for America, and that's both core members who are our teachers as well as staff members like myself, have to go through REI as part of our basic diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And so, if a 1,500 member national organization can do it, surely we can come up with a way for the city to do something similar.
Exactly. And Councilmember Brady and Jackson, that's exactly what the conversation was when we put that recommendation forward. One thing we did not want to happen was we start sending just the department heads over, and then 2-3 years later, it just stops and we never actually get down to the core members of the city staff. We know that the disparities and inequities and whatnot that can definitely surface sometimes can come from the bottom up or from the top down. So we want to make sure we try to push through to get every member, be it through REI with the Y, or even if you do, HR goes out to contract with another company to have a training developed just for the city of Charleston, same way we just did that with the college or whatnot. There are ways to actually get everyone who, to be able to be certified or have that training to be done over, well, I think we said biannually or whatnot. And I guess while we're on this point, we as John said, when we first came about on the subcommittee, the first thing that was said to us was to try to find things that we know that we can try to get knocked out as soon as possible. Some things that were, as Councilman Gregory once put it, were the low-hanging fruits of it. I mean, something as simple as having the city write out a racial equity framework and having all contractors who receive funding from the city to be able to agree to take that on before they can receive any type of funding from the city. Those are those low-hanging fruit that we said, okay, that might not even take a lot of funding right there. That just needs to go through legal. And just to have that posted up and having department heads and everybody else who wants to contract out with somebody to be able to use that. Those are some of the small things that we can try to knock out right now that won't require a lot of funding. But getting back to the actual training, we do want to make sure it won't just get stopped at the department heads or then don't try to bring it back and water it down anything. We want to try to get everybody who works for the city of Charleston through some type of training soon.
Councilmember Shealy, do you have any comments or questions you wanted to put on the table?
Well, I do want to ask, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask, I mean, there was something in our agenda here about a test or whatever that you had to pass to become an employee, and then you had to take it on a semi-annual basis. You have to pass this assessment. I don't think I saw that in your report, Amber. I'm not sure, and maybe I missed it.
I saw that also, and I made a note about it. It's under that first goal, which was to make Charleston a racially equitable working place. And it was, I think, the third one. Says the city of Charleston requires all employees to pass an assessment prior to onboarding and renew the certification on a biannual basis. That's one, I think, similar to what Councilmember Gregory mentioned earlier about kind of a legal review. Right now, we've only got pre-employment testing that we use in the police department and the fire department, and those are job skills tests. Any testing must be validated. It must be necessary to do their job. So we would just want to defer to legal to get their opinion on that and take a look at that. And I noticed that when the agenda came out, there was a little bit more detail on that one. And it mentioned something about generally organizations are doing that. Maybe some of the committee members who were involved with that could share with us a little bit more detail of some organizations doing that now, so we could take a look at that also.
All right. I mean, I guess I'd need a lot more information on that. I can't imagine us having a highly qualified candidate that, and maybe this person's has racism issues. Maybe he's a racist, but it seems like to me, if he is, and he knows he's taking that test to get a job, he's going to answer the questions properly. And we're going to check that box. Say, yep, he's good. Or it could possibly go the other way. We've got a couple of candidates there that are highly qualified, and neither one of them have a racist bone in their body, but you got one guy that answered a question differently than another, and you say, well, he looks like he might be a little more racist, so we're going to hire this other guy, and maybe neither one of them have a racist bone in their body whatsoever. So I'm glad to see that's not moving forward. I think that there's some real issues with that, so I'm glad legal's taking a hard look at that.
I don't know that they are yet, but that would be one of our suggestions.
And I did want to say that in the section that you are referencing, Heather, which was sent to us ahead of the meeting with our agenda, in parentheses under any sort of assessment prior to onboarding or renew certification, it says needs further discussion and development. So I think even the subcommittee recognized that this is it's a value that many other communities and employers are taking seriously. But in terms of what it would look like in our city for our employees or prospective employees, it does need further discussion and development.
Ms. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and it's kind of the way Councilman Shealy couched it. It's not a test to determine whether or not someone's a racist, okay? Just so we're clear, that's not what this is about. This is about to just sort of take an assessment to see whether or not there may be some biases, okay? So we're not talking about a test for whether or not a person is a racist. I don't think you can do a test for that.
Councilman Gregory, it says on there, City of Charleston will require all city employees to pass the assessment prior to, so there is a pass or fail written.
Maybe it's that
No,
word.
I don't disagree with you in that at all. Okay, I don't disagree with you there. It's just that I just want to make sure that we're not couching this as a test to determine who's a race and who's not. So I'm with you in terms of it needs further discussion and investigation. We're in the same place there. I just don't want us to call it something that it's not.
Okay. All right. I guess I'd like to know what constitutes a pass and fail. What does this test look like? How many questions are there? And how many do you have to get correct to say, yes, you got to pass? And who determines what's correct and what's wrong? How do you fail this test? Because it says you must pass it. So what do we know about this test?
And I think those are all legitimate questions, Councilman Shealy.
Okay.
When we
Go ahead, Dave. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Darren.
when we all go through trainings, and they will have what 4 or 5 different categories of the training or levels of the training and whatnot. At the end of each segment that you go through, you usually have an assessment. You either pass the assessment or you fail the assessment. Once you fail that assessment, you go back to the beginning of that training or that training portion and go through the training over until you get to that point that you pass the assessment. Then you move on to the next portion of it. So when we're talking about, all right, we're going to have this, you're going to either create or go through some type of REI training. At the end of that portion of whatever portion it is, you have to pass that assessment in order to understand and move on to the next part. And what we're saying is, prior to you onboarding and starting work, you should be able to go through. You should be able to go through this training, finish the entire training, and then go through and start working. That's what we mean. We're not saying like, okay, we're gonna. In order for you to work at the city, you can't be racist or whatnot. It shouldn't be like that. But no, the onboarding, this should be part of your onboarding process. You should have some type of REI training. You should have, just as you will have any other type of training. If you can't work a drill, you can't be a general contractor for or whatnot. You have to have some type of training before going forward. So that's what we mean by a pass fail.
Maybe we can just talk about maybe updating that language a little, because I think Councilmember Shealy's reading it kind of the way we read it, that it would be a pre-employment test. And I think, Darren, what I hear you saying is maybe that would be something that we would want our new hires to participate in, that we wouldn't want them to have to wait until the biennial offering of the training. Is that what I'm hearing you say? That we'd want them to have REI training as a new hire, not necessarily a pre-employment test. They'd go through that and there'd be an assessment, and we do something similar with our harassment training, where you go through these modules, you're asked questions to make sure that you were not just doing something else while it was going on, and that you were paying attention and learning something.
Yeah, and I was just going to bring that up as a great point. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councilman.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up as a great point and precedent, right? That's set within the organization. I do recall doing those very modules, and I believe right now where we're at is the point of coming to you all and sharing that we can shift the language to kind of meet and be more amenable to what you all are sharing, because what we put forward was what we meant. However, we understand and are okay with kind of shifting it to get to a place that feels more scalable and actually, able to be done. And it's something that's already got precedent to be done within our organization. So, I think that's kind of something that I don't mind seeing proposed updated language and for us to just get a chance to give blessing over it. So it doesn't feel like it's a complete washout of what we're intending it to serve as. And again, if it is, there's even I wouldn't, and I'd love to hear Darren's thoughts on this, but I wouldn't be upset if the assessment didn't have a score model that was a little more flexible. But again, it's something that can be measured and kind of seen for improvement over time, so that you can kind of get a sense of what's what. But again, that's my thought on the topic, and I just want to make it clear that this is the healthy kind of conversation that we're talking about and wanting to have, and not something where it feels like, oh, you see something that looks like it might be a little off-putting, so you're gonna just completely turn it down. We want to make sure that this is something where we're able to actually have some dialogue back and forth, and you can feel and hear where we're coming from, and not just feel like you're being pushed something that doesn't align with what your concerns are.
Councilmember Shealy, did you have?
Well, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do want to thank you all for all the time that you put in here. I mean, for me, racism in our city departments should not be tolerated. It'd be totally unacceptable. And I agree that we definitely need to be mindful of diversity of all of our departments and individual job descriptions. I do want to make sure that we have a great candidate base and that we include those minorities, but I hope that a number won't cause us to not hire the most qualified person. And I've served on this Human Resource Committee for 4 years now. I think this is the first time racism's been brought up to our HR committee. But was there anybody other than maybe Amber and John on here that were city employees that came up with the recommendations?
Jason Mitchell from the HR department also participated.
Okay, but nobody other than HR, just in general, I guess, did. Okay. I mean,
in this committee?
Right.
Yes, that was it on this committee, but we had other staff members staffing the other committees.
Okay.
And now, Councilmember Shealy, Amber has put together, I think she said, an equity core team of now 18 representatives from each of our departments. So I think that the conversation that we've just had and you all have, contributed to is my expectation and hope as we, as the commission put forward the entire report to be going through the next set of evaluation, deliberation, and prioritization steps that we all thought would be happening as we're trying to do it now. So it's really a wonderful time right this minute that we're starting to do exactly what the commission thought would necessarily, need to be going on for an extended period of time. We never thought that as a commission, we were just going to take these recommendations and immediately make them, the guide, the Bible that we were working under. We knew we were going to have to make them real, as John just said, and work them into the realities of our work program, the realities of the people that are going to be assigned to contribute their expertise to each of the functions and the strategies. So I think this is great. And I really appreciate everyone, saying what they wanted to say today. We're up on 4:15. So officially we have another 15 minutes and I would love to entertain any other comments or questions. There are a lot of things in here that I personally was curious about. You said, Amber, that you'd had the planning department in particular, you'd had some conversational opportunities. Can you give us just a snapshot of what that looked like in the recent weeks?
So in the planning department, I was able to, I think, present twice with them. The first time we watched a few videos about what equity in planning looks like, and have discussion with the department. And then our second meeting, we talked about the recommendations from the final report and what that looked like for the planning department and what it would look like for them going forward. So I think they have their own small committee where they're talking about the recommendations and the implementation of that work.
do you have any anecdotes or anything that you could just, I think the more that we make this real and sort of get away from the jargon that, we're married to in terms of discussing a lot of these things, that it really would, especially for those of us who are not immersed, in the topics as you all are. So give us like a fun little, anecdote of what came out of one of those conversations, if you would.
I think the best thing that has come out of that conversation is a project that I'm working on with planning and GIS. We're working on a racial equity mapping tool that will show displacement that has occurred in the city. We've already started, and so we have some of the maps where we can see where there's been movement in the city, movement out of the city, what that looks like. Also looking at the data, what that looks like, how it's changed, and being able to put it together in sort of a dashboard. And the map will also include these recommendations that have come out of the final report, and a way for us to keep track of what's started, what's been completed, and where we are with the work. So I think that's the most exciting thing that's come out of that conversation, is a project that we'll be able to work on long-term and help us keep track of the work that we're doing in terms of advancing racial equity within the city.
Madam Chairman.
Gregory.
Yeah, if I might add, for those in the committee that don't know, the city plan for the first time has equity and inclusion as a subject matter in the 10-year plan. Okay, to me that's monumental. And finally, this conversation is extremely encouraging to me. You have no idea. My colleague, Kevin, I appreciate, your input and hope that I know you'll continue, because this is very encouraging. In fact, all of the meetings that I have attended thus far with standing committees, Mr. Mayor, has been extremely encouraging. And as we went through many of the recommendations, some of which we're already doing and implementing. So for me, subcommittee and standing committee, okay, this is a very, very encouraging conversation for me, and I appreciate it.
I totally agree. And if you hadn't brought up the city plan, that was going to be the next thing that I made clear, that the city plan covered a lot of ground that had never been even, looked at before, as far as those of us who were, introduced to it based on the past two plans. And so the fact that now we've got the umbrella of planning, and we've got the planning staff digging into what that can look like and marrying it up with some of the evaluations and the recommendations that this committee will take on, as well as, finding housing and mobility. I mean, we never really thought this should all just stay in the silos of the subcommittees, right? We're going to be connecting the networks, the relationships, the work product from across the agencies, the departments of the city. I agree. I don't see how it could be anything but an amazing venture that you all are going to undertake. Mr. Mayor, you've been very...
So if I may chime in at this point, now let's see, where do I want to start? Lots of things we're working on, and it's been noted already about our living wage, minimum wage efforts, particularly just Tuesday night, passing a budget that included a 3 mil increase with an 11-1 vote, which was pretty remarkable. And truly all of that millage is dedicated to our employees and trying to pay a more fair wage. And I think back over just the last 6 years that I've been mayor, and when I got elected, we were at $8.50 an hour, and to be at 14, I mean, our goal has been 15 and we got delayed, but you know, we made some real progress there in addition to having decent benefits. I did pull up on my other screen that current, and I remember 6 years ago looking at that MIT wage calculator, and if I remember correctly, it was right around $14 for Charleston at that time, and now it's at $16.13. And that's for one adult with no children. If two adults are both working, it's only $12.58. So, you know, it depends on the family thing, composition as to what it could be. But I think you go by one adult, and it's at 16.13. So we still got a ways to go. But anyway, that's good progress. John Mitchell mentioned a few minutes ago about how the LGBTQ community has a national like grading system. And over the last 6 years, we've gone from a grade of 33 to 81, and that's the highest score in the state of South Carolina. And I don't know, Amber, if there's some organization out there that does some kind of scoring thing like that. Actually, I found it very helpful over the last 6 years. I'm a very, you know, numbers oriented guy and kind of competitive. So we started at 33 and I was like, oh, I know we can do better than that. And the next year we got 48, you know, and the next year it was 57 and next year it was 63 or whatever it was. And so maybe we do that internally or somebody's doing something like that. But, you know, some accountability is always a good thing to think about. Then to the training, I wanted to, you know, there are a lot of different things out there. And I guess, as y'all were saying, the REI is the standard. I think Wesley's right that we really need to scope what we as a city really want to see in our training. And we've gotten to the point, Wesley, how much onboarding time is there when we take on a new employee now? It's grown pretty substantially.
Mayor, we're, you know, right now we're doing, you know, pretty much the entire day of onboarding. A lot of information between benefits and, you know, the employee culture. So it's pretty extensive, and we're looking to go, you know, somewhat virtual right now, of course, like everyone else, but it's pretty extensive.
Yeah. So it seems to me drilling down first on the scope of what we want to include as part of that onboarding, be it in that first day or part of a separate little seminar kind of thing. But I wouldn't be afraid once we decide what it is we want to include in it of hiring someone to help us develop our own little module system, because we have to have it sustainable and reasonably priced. And you know, a lot of good people have put a lot of good work into this, and you know, could help us develop a system. And I'll give you an example. I stole an idea from the mayor of Denver. He had this training module called Peak Academy to get employees to think about innovation and process improvements. And we sent some people out there, and then after a couple of years, we got our consultant to help us do our own. And we now have Bridge Academy that we've put 2 classes through, and we're training our own employees to do that. So I would keep an open mind about whether long-term we could get a consultant to help us develop our own system. And then lastly, and Amber, could you go back to that first screen strategies you had up there? And
Do you mean the goals that they were supposed to?
yeah, it was the first page with
Yeah.
about 12 things on the list. And there you go. training. Work with community partners to develop a racial equity framework to reverse uneven hiring and promotion standards. I agree. I think that's important. We focus on various departments who we knew weren't doing very well, like the fire department. So we've kind of looked at it department by department, but I don't know that we've ever really thought about it so well citywide. Require all city contractors to adopt the city's racial equity framework prior to obtaining city funds. So what piqued my question here, or I think needs more discussion, is exactly what do you mean by racial equity framework? I'd like, is that something we draft? Is that something we need to talk about and create? Somebody else has one that we model after, or something like that. I feel like that needs some more development so that we're all get on the same page as to what that quote framework is. And does that make sense?
I agree, Mayor Tecklenburg. And one thing I had a note by that one, I know that we had given Ryan Landry as a contact for the committee, but I don't think they got any data or requested any from us. So I think that would be helpful too, because if you're trying to measure, if we don't have a starting point, I don't know how we would measure if there's a difference. So I wasn't sure if we could get more detail on that.
I mean,
And
I
also
have,
more detail about what's meant by working with community partners.
I mean, I have some ideas with regard to that. I mean, we already have MBEWBE pieces tied to contracting. We also have, most of our contractors have to certify compliance with civil rights laws, such as Section 8, Section 3, and there are a number of other ones. In other words, we wouldn't be starting with a blank slate because there are things that they're already required to do,
Right.
as opposed to being required to do and being monitored to determine if they're doing it. That's a totally different question. And I think that what this will get at is a determination of compliance at a minimum with some of the civil rights laws that they're certified to. Just a thought off the top, but I think there is a way for us to work it.
So that one in
thank you, Mayor. I
particular
had
would
the
be
same
related to another department too. So that the contracting doesn't fall under HR, that would not be anything we would have authority over, but we definitely can connect this to the appropriate department.
And I think my question was about the framework concept. I think the mayor's, definitely hitting that on the nail on the head. I would hope, or maybe Amber already knows, that there are other jurisdictions or larger entities that would already have some sort of model for what a framework would be that would include a lot of the legal requirements that, as you said, Councilmember Gregory, that a potential contractor already has to agree. They have, they are in compliance. But it's across our own departments that we don't necessarily have those same types of compliance measurements. And I think that's what the framework would accomplish. Am I right about that, Amber? Can you tell us anything more?
Yes, there are cities that have models. It would just be up to us to decide what's a priority for us and what we want to include in our framework. So I think it could be a lot of pulling from best practices. So we're not starting from scratch, but I think it's just important for us to put it in writing and say, this is what our priorities are, and this is our framework, and this is where direction that we want to go going forward.
And that might help inform the scoping for the training as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Can we put that back on your office, Mayor? Since it's
Amber?
not only HR, it's not only legal, I think we make that your homework assignment for the new year, that then it'll take that more generalized, let's find the scope that works for the whole city and our community partners.
Okay, and Madam Chairman, I think sometimes we forget where Amber is housed. Amber is housed in the mayor's office. So whatever is coming out of there will come through Amber. So you're just giving her more work.
Yeah, but I think that's a bare bones kind of,
Yeah.
That's why you call it the framework, right? It's the underpinning for a lot of these future decisions.
And it should be a starting place. I mean, you don't really want the train to get very far out of the station without something like that, right? As our foundation. So.
Right. All right.
Well, thank you. I'm open to entertaining final comments, questions. Thank yous again to our representatives from the subcommittee, Mr. Calhoun and Mr. Mitchell. We miss you. Please continue to do your good work for the city. And I wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I'm sure we'll see everyone at the council meeting on the 21st of December.
Madam Chair, I think
Yes,
we would be remiss if we don't acknowledge, number one, this is probably your last Human Resource Commission chairmanship. And what a way to go out. What a way to go out, okay? And I just want to let you know you're appreciated, and because you're no longer a council person, my God, I know we're going to hear from you.
I've already told the mayor he doesn't want me showing up for citizen time, so.
And I just want to say thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I do owe Heather and Kay in particular, and Amber and Jennifer, sort of my hard-headedness apology, because I was dedicated to have this meeting before I do leave office and before I give up the baton to whoever will be the new chair for the Human Resources Committee. I do feel like, we're underway, and I didn't want to lose the momentum that has been generated since since the mayor received the report in September, to wait for a whole new formation of a new HR committee. So thank you very much for tolerating my hard-headed determination. I really do appreciate it.
You're going to be missed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so